So before we get into program 3 proper, Qualth comes in Sporax. Some thoughts that I didn't get expressed last time included the idea that we should be careful about the food supply and, realizing what's the most basic important thing for us to find, and heeding spiritual advice, and how weapons are they're not exactly the answer.
Right.
There's always a cost to using them, even if you think you have the upper hand. Now, the one thing that they're looking at is they're looking at a particular mode of authority is represented by an animal that we saw mentioned here. But the West is transgressing the bounds of its own laws and should probably look at some of that Eastern wisdom, or at least that Middle Eastern wisdom that wasn't supposed to be thought of in that regard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. So there's 40 lines here, and 9 sections of lines. And something indicated by that I thought was a little bit, sometimes we can't exactly rally people, but we can focus on ourselves. We can look for truth for ourselves, even though that greater disaster than even these outer disasters is hitting left and right. And some of the spiritual beings, they know things that humans don't. They're not limited by these physical bodies, so they can find out stuff. So sometimes they do tell people stuff.
Right.
I think that some of these weird things that come through in some people's visions and stuff are lost languages, and the spirits are telling us, hey, this used to be something that was out there,
Right. Yeah.
So
I agree.
If I may continue. Now, the Solomonic triangle. I have my pillow here, and it's not showing up on the screen. I painted it more recently than I made it. And I put some other stuff on it, but you can't see. So I guess that's done with that part of the conversation. So let's, so if you know that Solomonic triangle with the weird symbols on it, there's a chant. Solazor Amdia Haliza Bellator Belloni Halira. And we're in the realm of Visago, we could say. Our Sitael, as the program's entitled. One might want to look at the movie Hideaway. Hideaway is an awesome movie. I'm not sure how much it relates to Visago, but that character that calls himself Visago in the movie, wonderful thing. Now, Dean Koontz didn't like the movie because the movie started with a scene well, I'm not really sure why, but the book's different than the movie is, and the movie mixed up parts of it, and it's kind of a spoiler, the opening scene to the movie, if you remember that movie. It had one of the best soundtracks. Artists you didn't hear of and stuff like this, but that's not terribly important because usually they just they just suck, so that's whatever. But it's interesting. It's one of the best music soundtracks. You ever seen that movie?
It sounds familiar.
It shows the scenes of heaven and hell. So Sitael was what the one character came back with, and the other came back with Visago. And
I think it's interesting how, like if a movie is based off of a book, like the book will be slightly different. It's like they make the movie, visually different slightly different,
Well,
you know, with
sometimes they can't
the
do things justice. It's like, I know, okay, fine. R.L. Stein was a group. And so the thing with R.L. Stein was like, but the Goosebump show,
Mhm.
no, it wasn't, it was, I was trying to recapture some of the nostalgia of reading those books when I was younger through this show, and the show is not good at all. Same thing with the Lovecraft movies. The things on Lovecraft books, it's like,
Mhm.
nothing really reaches that. I mean, they can give you some moods and stuff with dark colors and sounds, but it's not the sort of stuff that especially a spiritually minded person reading Lovecraft is going to come across. Now, do I think the Lovecraftian theology is the best one in the world? No, I'm not saying that. As much as, for example, in the Temple of Blood, they definitely bring up the fact that, and Order of Nine Angles stuff in general. If anybody mentions Lovecraft, it's like Lovecraft wasn't a prophet, but it was closer to it, right? He kind of told us the sort of spiritual beings that are out there in a way. And he did mix in some mythology that was sort of what you'd call actual mythology rather than just pure fiction. But, rather than letting this go into some too extra thing like that. So I would end my evening rites. I'd end it with a sort of a sacrament, symbolic blood, symbolic flesh. So the flesh would be the flesh would be some sort of bread product. Now my tolerance of some stuff has gone way down to the point where I have to, but I don't want to necessarily say all my issues with what could be bread products, you could say, but I do still use that, but I just use stuff that I can use. Not so much sugar, that sort of stuff, or no sugar added if possible. And then I use dark juice. Like, for example, I'm not sure at this point what I'm going to use in my evening. We're doing these programs sort of towards preparation for my. Maybe I'll save peach juice because of its orange color for a Samhain ritual. I don't know. I'll make my decision as that approaches. But I usually use a red juice in my seasonals and my evening rites. I use a red juice if I'm going to do the food element. May become my blood, might become my flesh. Now the verse that I had found out for here is we have. Okay, where's. So 684. Wawahamnalahu eshakawaya kuba kulanharena wanuhan harena min kamdu min zuriyatahi dauda wa Sulaimana wa Ayuba wa Yusufa wa Musa Waharuna wakadhalika nadzil muhsinin. And one of the things that what?
This is very interesting. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just heard you say, I know you were like chanting, but I literally just heard you say in English, the wise are always learning by all experiences, both good and bad. So that was pretty neat.
Well, we see this list of entities, and the meaning of that verse includes that stuff was before and stuff's going to be there again, because those who are doing what they should be doing and those who are being guided and the descendants of their guidance. So it's listing different figures of that. And of course, I say this because Solomon is listed among that. And the Church of Hermetic Sciences, the Ordo Templi Astartes, has a different view of Jesus and John and Elias than is standard to Christianity or Judaism. But that's somewhat something to talk about elsewhere.
That just reminded me of.
And so, in a way, al muhsinin does relate to all that, because it's not just you're good. It's you say something, and then you purify that saying, so it's sort of a living wisdom.
Yeah, there's a fine line between good and bad, and you know, a lot of times things that appear bad are really good, and things that are good appear, you know, are bad.
Okay. So you're ready for let me. So what are your thoughts
When you read that
on
very
these
last,
7 sections of?
it's like when you just read that very last couple sentences, I had just wrote that, you know, about pollution, you know, the pollution polluting the earth could be making people off balance. There's no peace, and you know, the population just increases in population, which there's nothing wrong with population increase, but it's like the people get weaker, like their bodies are weaker, even though, you know, there's more people. And
And
it,
well, and they use it as an excuse to not take care of us as well. But one of the things that can happen every couple 100 years, there's a big old solar flare, and the technology is more or less taken away. We're not just losing some telegraph wires this time around. We've set us up to basically kill off 90% of every country that it happens to if there's a big solar flare.
yeah, we're like so dependent on electric,
And it explains a lot of stuff. It explains a lot of stuff back in the day. It's not UFOs, it's solar flares. It's not it's not aliens, it's spiritual beings, it's people having psychedelic experiences. It's like you stare off into the ocean. You develop the techniques of scrying and stuff like this. You see some weird colors and shapes and all sorts of other stuff. Sometimes there's beings there and some, pretty interesting stuff. But one of the things that comes through with this that I would agree with wholeheartedly is that a lot of stuff going on is because they're using this as a distraction. They want to accomplish other stuff. They want to hide the truth about certain continents or certain things on certain continents. There's, as I said, Saudi Arabia is setting itself up to have these giant buildings and basically miles long buildings and stuff like that. And
distractions.
And one of the things is like, okay, Islam doesn't have this wars of conquest, but Christianity definitely does. But their stuff's being stirred up as a reactionary thing, because people are being attacked in certain countries. Wars of terrorism, as I call them, are driving millions of people out of their homes at any time, tens of millions of people. And how they're supposed to react? And people are focusing on martyrdom processions rather than getting back to their own basic faith. And there's issues with that too. One, there's a lot of disease. If people are beating themselves and cutting themselves bloody in the street, if that becomes a standard thing in those countries, the rate of disease is bound to go up.
Yeah, definitely.
And an interesting thing that's very important to do if you're ever going to any false prophet, anybody who's going to pull the false prophet thing. Now, I'm not saying that this is what they're doing. They're getting the numbers that come in the vision and what they say is being said. I'm taking them at their word that this is what they're hearing. It's interesting that those dates pretty much exclude Carol Pope Runyon. They exclude Frater Solomon there. So it's after after their life, so much of this stuff. 2012, they used to say 2012 was one of those big ones. They said all this environmental stuff, you better have all these restrictions because everything's going to end in 2012. The polar ice caps are going to melt. And John Kerry said it was 2014, and that didn't go through. And 2020 was another date they put out there that wasn't right. They said that things might make it to 1999 back in 1987. That didn't work. So this is what Trump, for example, meant when he said that these prophets of doom are trying to take away our freedoms. And see, but that's not the thing here. I don't think that they're doing that. Now, Gomar would be a place. But see, again, people are focused so much on this Martian stuff, and they're focused on fantasies rather than real character building.
Right.
And some
Reality.
of these and we're having capricious leaders that we don't know what they're going to do in one case or the other. Are they going to do something good here or the other? And the monarchs, the monarch programming, that's what I think of. Now, a couple of these terms, I don't know if you figured out what these terms mean. There are old names for countries and stuff like this that are obscure, and you don't really hear of anybody using them except on some old map that people hardly ever talk of. So I don't know if that's coming, or I don't know if that's what they're talking about.
Mhm.
Just like they're talking about the chivalry before, here it seems to be much the opposite, that it's, people are lost in entertainment,
Yeah.
and perhaps some other stuff. But the
And
monarch
you know,
programming is the altered states, trauma particularly, the altered states used to get people to do stuff.
mhm,
And the movement from that, because you don't mess with trauma.
right.
And you notice what one person said in regards to me. Oh, I know he has trauma. So see, I don't know if that makes me a target, or that makes me somebody that they're just messing with because of stuff, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but yeah, there's this general distraction. And so unless you have any further thoughts for that one, I think
Uh,
we can move on to number 2 here.